Hello, AP class. This is Miss McConnell. I hope everyone is doing well. I am looking forward to talking with you about the AP 2014 released exam, which can be found in the AP English Language and Composition course description. So if you haven't found that yet, Google that and you will be able to find this exam. It is at about page 48 of this document. So I'm going to scroll down to page 48. We are only in this video going to look at questions 1 through 11, and we're going to do a close reading of that prompt because that work in particular is a difficult one to read. And I want to make sure that you understand the reasons for each and every question and that you understand the language itself. Okay. So here we go. This is questions 1 through 11, the very first prompt, very first passage from the sample multiple choice questions. After I read the passage, and I will highlight some points along the way, I will then review with you the answers. And not just the answers themselves, but the logic of the answers, I hope, will unveil itself to you. Because even whether you got it right or wrong in the first place is less important than that you can get it right going forward. And I particularly like the spirit of this prompt because it's not talking, it begins by talking about how important it is that not just that you get a right answer, but that you understand how to solve. So as we read along, we'll think about that important concept, that important educational philosophy. All right, here we go. Whoops, scrolled right past it. It has been It has been well said that the highest aim in education is analogous to the highest aim in mathematics. Wow. Education is analogous, that is, comparable to the highest goals of mathematics. Well, in what way is X like Y? We've talked about analogies before as comparing two unlike things. Namely, to obtain not results, but powers, not particular solutions, but the means by which endless solutions may be wrought. Okay, so the way that education is like mathematics is that the real purpose of it, the best purpose of it, is to obtain not just the right answer, but the power to calculate the right answer. Not just a particular solution, but the means by which, that is, the understanding by which endless solutions may be wrought. He is the most effective educator who aims less at perfecting specific acquirements than at producing that mental condition which renders acquirements easy and leads to the useful application. Got a semicolon here, so we're getting another comparable clause to this clause. Who does not seek to make his pupils moral by enjoining particular courses of action, but by bringing into activity the feelings and sympathies that must issue in noble action. On the same ground, it may be said that the most effective writer is not he who announces a particular discovery, who convinces men of a particular conclusion. Oh, look at that appositive phrase. Doesn't do this and doesn't do that. Okay, that's renaming this the type of thinker they don't want to be. On the same ground, it may be said that the most effective writer is not he who announces a particular discovery, who convinces men of a particular conclusion, and we've got the third one now, who demonstrates that this measure is right and that measure is wrong, semicolon, but, okay, and we need that semicolon there because we have this comparative element with several commas within, so we can't just use another comma. But, and here's what you want, okay, right? This is what a good writer should do. But he who rouses in others the activity that must issue in discovery, who awakes men from their indifference to the right and the wrong. And now we get the third one. Ready? Who nerves their energies to seek for the truth and live up to it at whatever cost. I hope you saw that whole, not this, but that syntactical approach. Not this, but that. It came several times. And the third time we had it with three elements on either side of that semicolon. This author is certainly a master of parallel structure. Okay, back to here. The influence of such a writer is dynamic. Please notice that after that very long sentence, we get this short, emphatic sentence. He does not teach men how to use sword and musket, but he inspires their souls with courage and sends a strong will into their muscles. He does not, perhaps, enrich your stock of data, but he clears away the film from your eyes that you may search for data to some purpose. He does not, perhaps, convince you, but he strikes you, undeceives you, animates you. Oh, listen to that asyndeton, right? You are not directly fed by his books, but you are braced as by a walk up to an alpine summit, and yet subdued to calm and reverence as by the sublime things to be seen from that summit. We haven't talked about what the word sublime means, but the word sublime is an awe-inspired feeling, and a feeling of overwhelming beauty and awe. And so a walk up of the Alps, a summit, the highest point of a mountain in the Alps, might induce you to feel both calm at the same time revere in the beauty. Okay, and he's saying that's a lot better than just being fed by these books. You are braced. Now, all of that was one paragraph, and now we get our second paragraph. And look at this short, emphatic sentence. Such a writer is Thomas Carlyle. Okay, such a writer as everything that came in that preceding paragraph. It is an idle question to ask whether his books will be read a century hence, if they were all burnt as the grandest of sutties on his funeral pile, it would be only like cutting down an oak after its acorns have sown a forest. This is a wonderful comparison. It says, if all of his books were burned up, it wouldn't matter, because like an oak that has dropped all of these acorns and therefore made a whole forest of mighty oaks, so too are the influence of Thomas Carlyle's book. For there is hardly a superior or active mind of this generation that has not been modified by Carlyle's writing. Okay, so what's happening here is, they're saying all the thinkers of this generation. Who's this generation? Well, the writer's generation. All of them, if they're superior or active, they've been changed somehow, modified by Carlyle. There has hardly been an English book written for the last 10 or 12 years that would not have been different if Carlyle had not lived. The character of his influence is best seen in the fact that many of the men who have the least agreement with his opinions are those to whom the reading of Sartor Resartus was an epoch in the history of their minds. Okay, I don't know what Sartor Resartus is, but you do, because you may not know the book, just as I don't know the book, but you do know, because it's in italics, that it is a title, right? And it is a title of an important of a publication, and we can assume that it's a publication of Carlyle's. It's one of his books. And an epoch is a period in history. an important period of history, a period in which something special happened. The extent of his influence may be best seen in the fact that ideas which were startling novelties when he first wrote them are now become commonplaces. Okay, one of the evidences of Thomas Carlyle's influence is that he shared ideas that were startling novelties. That is, they were novel, they were new. That is where the word novel comes from. You just may have thought it just meant books, but oh no, it means something new, something that is novel. And now they've become commonplace. That is, now they're just something that is accepted far and wide. And we think few men will be found to say that this influence on the whole has not been good. There are plenty, okay? This word plenty comes as a stand-in for other men who, that we think few men will be found to say that this influence on the whole has not been good. Few people would say that overall the influence has not been good, though there are individuals, many individuals perhaps, okay? There are plenty who question the justice of Carlyle's estimates of past men and past times. Plenty who quarrel with the exaggerations of the latter-day pamphlets. Okay, again, you recognize the title and you recognize that this is just, oh yeah, this one work that he wrote, maybe it was a little bit of an exaggeration and some people would quarrel with it. They would disagree with it. And, okay, and we're at our third item, who are as far as possible from looking for an amendment of things from a Carlylean theocracy, with the greatest man as a Joshua who is to smite the wicked and the stupid till the going down of the sun. Well, I don't know this allusion, but you get a gloss on it. But there are plenty who are not looking to Carlyle to show them what a good theocracy would do. All right, given there are plenty of people who don't like some specific things, and again, we get this constant contrast in the writing. Oh yeah, this is true, but then this is true. But for any large nature, those points of difference are quite incidental. What does she mean by that? It is not as a theorist. Oh, but here is what is really important about Carlyle. But as a great and beautiful human nature that Carlyle influences us. Okay, so it's not so much in his specifics, but in his overall abilities, overall influences. You may meet a man whose wisdom seems unimpeachable, that is, unable to be questioned, since you find him entirely in agreement with yourself. Okay, you might, and so she's speculating, she's putting a hypothetical here. You might meet somebody who you agree with and you think, okay, all of his ideas are like mine. But this oracular man, and you know this word because you know what an oracle is. Beware the Ides of March, okay? An oracle, someone who's oracular can see perhaps into the future. But this oracular man of unexceptionable opinion has a green eye. And you know that green eyes are signs of envy, right? The green eye of envy. A wiry hand. Uh-oh, is he a thief? And altogether a wizen. All right, I don't know what a wizen is. We have this in italics. It's a word taken from another language, perhaps. It sounds a bit Germanic and like a wizened man. So it's a fork, as far as I can tell, it's a kind of a folkloric reference or demeanor. Okay, so so this is somebody who's sort of a shadowy figure, maybe something like Merlin kind of figure, that makes the world look blank to you, and whose unexceptionable opinions become a bore. All right, So even though you agree with this person and you think this person is awesome in his some of the opinions that you both share, you find out that behind the guy, there isn't a healthy view of the world. Now we get the semicolon and we see the comparison. While another man who deals in what you cannot, but think dangerous paradoxes. Okay, so you don't agree with him necessarily. You think, oh, that's something, I don't know that I agree with that. That guy, another man who deals in what you cannot but think dangerous paradoxes, warms your heart by the pressure of his hand and looks out on the world with so clear and loving an eye that nature seems to reflect the light of his glance upon your own feeling. Well, you think, I don't know that I agree with that, but as you read this author, not the one you agreed with, but the one you kind of question, you are moved to see the world in a new way. And now look at this. We get such a short, emphatic sentence after that long exposition. So it is with Carlyle. Boom, there it is. Okay, right? That's how Carlyle works. When he is saying the very opposite of what we think, he says it so finely, with so hearty, and I'm going to scroll here, conviction. He makes the object about which we differ stand out in such grand relief under the clear light of his strong and honest intellect. He appeals so constantly to our sense of the manly and the truthful that we are obliged to say, "Hear, hear," to the writer before we can give the decorous "oh, oh" to his opinions. All right, here we go. Let's take a look at these questions, and you've now just heard this, and we want to think as we move through these in the process of elimination, how would we go about answering these questions? What is the relationship between the two paragraphs in the passage? And of course, this is one of the main features of this passage, is that it's two long paragraphs, okay? And so we've got the answers. The first paragraph says this, the second does that. And of course, we need something that has both parts that are correct. The first paragraph explains Carlyle's major ideas, and the second evaluates his predictions. No, the first paragraph doesn't do that. What I'd suggest you do as you think about this question is to first answer it in your own words. What do you think the relationship between the two paragraphs in the passage is? And it is there is a kind of general discussion of what good thinking is, and then we get the specific discussion of Carlyle. Now, we do get Carlyle's, well, we don't get his major ideas anywhere. We just get this kind of natural influence he has, and we don't get any predictions. So this is just a wrong answer. The first paragraph considers who influenced Carlyle. Nobody. We don't hear about any of the influences on Carlyle. And the second lists those he influenced. While it is mentioned that he influences people, we don't get a list of who he influenced. Wrong answer. The first paragraph describes Carlyle's critics. No, we don't even have a critic mentioned. And the second depicts his supporters. No. This answer is one that doesn't reflect even a basic understanding of this text. The first paragraph surveys various types of writers. Well, it does talk about different kinds of thinkers. And the second focuses on Carlyle. And it is true that this is what happens in the second. We get specific focus on Carlyle. That's a close answer, right? Let's take a look at A. The first paragraph describes strengths of a writer that Carlyle exhibits. Yes, these are the kind of strengths of writers that Carlyle has. Okay, so the strengths that were pointed out are strengths that Carlyle exhibits. That is true. And the second discusses his legacy. Yes, His legacy is that he has had a strong influence on the greatest thinkers, that even people who disagree with him still come to respect some of his ideas. Okay, so A is the best choice. B is a fairly good wrong answer, but clearly A is a better answer here. All right, moving on. Number 2. Which of the following best represents the author's intended audience? Who they weren't necessarily thinking of, this author wasn't necessarily thinking of writing for students in the 21st century in Kuwait. Who did this author have in mind? Who is the audience? And again, this is a basic question. We should always be thinking about who is the primary audience and maybe even the secondary audience. Scholars seeking maybe scholars, but seeking information about Carlyle's personal life? Well, if that was the intended audience, they didn't give any information for that intended audience. Instructors looking for a different way to teach Carlyle? Well, maybe there is mention of teaching, but certainly not how to teach Carlyle. Okay. Writers who hope to produce books that are like Carlyle's? This is not a how-to description of how to write a book that is like Carlyle's. Readers who are having trouble understanding Carlyle's prose. And no, this is not a Cliff Notes for Carlyle. This is not a breaking down the main ideas. This is not providing an outline of the main ideas. Individuals who are fairly well acquainted with Carlyle's writing. Well, we're not acquainted with Carlyle's writing, but what evidence is there that this is the intended audience? Remember I said I didn't know those books that were being referenced? Yeah, but the author must have thought that the audience she was writing for would know that. So the best answer here is A. Okay, moving right along. 3. In lines 5 through 12, he is, and it goes all the way to line 12, just to quickly remind you of that. I'm not going to scroll back. He is the most effective educator who aims less at perfecting specific acquirements than at producing the mental condition which renders acquirements easy and leads to their useful application. And it goes on, okay? All right. This is a contrast. And what is being contrasted there? The acquisition of skills and the possession of aptitude, the labor of reasoning and the exhilaration of acting, the dissemination of knowledge and the cultivation of intellectual and moral powers, the traits of practical students and those of creative thinkers, the benefits of learning and the rewards of teaching. Okay, these are all kind of comparative. Now, I just read you the passage. He is the most effective educator who doesn't bother spending time just teaching you things, but tries to cultivate your mind, cultivate your mental condition, which renders acquirements, that is, acquirements of intellectual power, easy and leads to their useful application. You not only have the power to do it, you can understand how to use that. Okay, the benefits of learning and the rewards of teaching, no mention of the rewards of teaching, that's wrong. The traits of practical students. No, this is not about practical students and those of creative thinking, those of creative thinkers. It's not separating students and thinkers. The dissemination of knowledge, for sure, and how to cultivate the intellectual and moral powers, absolutely. Are any of the other ones in the running? The labor of reason and the exhilaration of acting. We don't really have any mention of acting there, okay? And the acquisition of skills and the possession of aptitude. We don't have the acquiring of certain skills. Far more is said about how to gain knowledge and apply that knowledge. So A is probably the second best answer, but C is clearly a more accurate answer for this question. Number 4, the author uses the phrase "on the same ground" to set up a comparison between the aims of mathematics and those of education. Well, that did happen in the passage, but it happened before this reference. Conceptually powerful writers and exemplary educators. That is actually what that was talking about. Okay? Intellectual challenges faced by writers and those faced by readers, not mentioned in the passage. The formulation of solutions and the identification of problems, also just not mentioned in the passage. Scientific writing, whoa, stop, the presses, not even mentioned. So while you could be tricked by A, okay, and if you went back and looked at the passage, you'd see that the "on the same ground" introduces a new idea. And that idea is how powerful writers and exemplary educators are doing, are kind of on the same, in the same situation. So B is clearly the best answer there. On to 5. On the basis of the first paragraph, Thomas Carlyle is best characterized as a writer who is, and now we get general characterizations of the writer, okay? Ambitious, revolutionary, charismatic, provocative, masterful. All right, if we just take a look at that, and I missed the word provocative. While all of them are possibilities, the word provocative means that it challenges one, it provokes greater thinking. And so we see what they mean by ambitious. He tries to increase the number of people buying books. No, we don't have any mention of that. Revolutionary, agitating his readers to adopt a radically new worldview. That isn't his goal. He's not a revolutionary leader, a political leader, or anything like that. We wouldn't know what that new worldview is. Charismatic. Well, he does seem charismatic, enticing his readers to support his views and beliefs. Well, this prompt loses it here, right? This distractor goes off the rails here because we don't see Carlyle talking about himself. Remember, we got the impression that Carlyle engages the reader into thinking about the whole natural world in a more sublime and profound way. Provocative, for sure, compelling his readers to reach their own conclusions. Well, that seems, you could even disagree with his specifics, but you would come to have a deeper understanding of the world. That seems the best answer so far. Masterful. Okay. Overpowering his readers with a sense of awe and veneration. Well, he does evoke some awe, certainly in this author. But if we are thinking about what his overall impression is, it is that he is provocative. He compels the readers to reach their own conclusion, just as the best math teacher helps you to reach, not just get the right answer, but go forward and look and be able to find your own solutions. Okay, this lovely little simile about the acorns and Carlyle's ideas represents Carlyle's young children? No. Carlyle's less prominent contemporaries? No. Ideas in Carlyle's books? Sure, yes. Books written by Carlyle? About Carlyle? No. Those who are critical of Carlyle? No. Everyone should have gotten this right. Those acorns are the ideas in Carlyle's books that have grown up, taken root, and you can throw the book away. You can, just like you can cut down the oak tree, but the ideas have been planted and are growing into new trees, proverbial new trees. Number 7. In lines 47 to 48, the author refers to an epoch in the history of their minds. 2. Illustrate the ways in which other intellectuals disagreed with Carlyle. Well, that's just not what that means. If you're saying something had a giant impact, it was like an era is to history. This was to my mind. This was to how I thought. It just, just like the World War II had a dramatic impact on all of Europe. That was an epoch in history. This writer is an epoch of my mind. It doesn't mean that the intellectuals disagree. Does it define the meaning of the title? No, it does not. Does it question the continued relevance of Carlyle's ideas? According to this author, there's no question about that. Does it describe the major impact that Carlyle had on other people? Yes, he had such a major impact that he was like a moment in history. Okay, and everything changed forever after that moment. Does it characterize the arduous process of reading Sartor Resartus? Arduous means super hard, right? Really hard, difficult. Well, it may be difficult to read Sartor Resartus, but that isn't what that epoch means. The author mentions the latter-day. Oh, so did I give you the right answer? Number 7 is D. All right, onward. Number 8. The author mentions the latter-day pamphlets, lines 55 to 56, primarily to, okay, what is the purpose of that? Provide an example of what is undisputably good? No, remember we talked about the plenty you're going to disagree with it? That means plenty of individual people don't like it, so that can't be right. Identify the book that discusses past men and past times. No, that was the next example that did that. Acknowledge some of the concerns held by the plenty. Yeah, that's exactly right. So plenty of people don't like that work. Justify Carlyle's desire for an amendment of things. No. Explain Carlyle's inspiration for the theory of the greatest man. That wasn't even in that. Okay, so clearly the best answer is C here. Okay. What rhetorical strategy does the author adopt in line 44 to 63? All right, this is a big, long passage. Please take a look at it. All right. We are talking almost about the whole of paragraph 2. The character of his influence is best seen in the fact that many of the men who have the least agreement with his opinions are those to whom the reading was an epoch of the history of their minds, all the way down to all the people that don't agree with him specifically, but still love him. So if we look at that passage and you say, okay, in my own words, what does that passage say? Well, he's the kind of guy that you don't have to agree with at all about some things, but you find yourself profoundly agreeing with what he's saying. Okay, so let's see if we can find a distractor here, a detractor that gives us that reply. All right, again for number 9. She because the author here is a she. She goes on the offensive, berating opponents of Carlyle. Oh, no, she doesn't. She acknowledges but discredits other arguments. No, she says that they might have a point, but that doesn't mean that he isn't overwhelmingly interesting and important. She claims that most people do not recognize Carlyle's genius. No, she says that most people do, most people of her era do, but that there are plenty of people who have their own opinions about certain aspects of his work. She cites facts. No, she doesn't. To counter opposition to Carlyle's eminence. Eminence means importance. Claiming that all of Carlyle's judgments are unassailable. No, she doesn't claim that all of Carlyle's ideas are unable to be criticized, unable to be assaulted. She thinks some of them can be. So let's hope it's E, because that's our last one. She gives examples of Carlyle's far-reaching influence, noting that even criticism of Carlyle implies praise. Clearly the best answer. All right. Onward. 2 more and then we're done. What purpose do lines 63 to 67, 63 to 74 serve? And 63, you may meet a man whose wisdom seems unimpeachable since you find him entirely in agreement with yourself, but this oracular man of unexceptionable opinions has a green eye and a wire. Remember that? Okay. What is that doing rhetorically? Contrasting he and we. Well, actually, we have a lot of yous in there, okay? And she is directly addressing her audience as a you. Inserting dat. Oh, wait a minute. Am I in the right one? No, sorry. 63 to 74. I am on the right one, but I'm looking at. Yeah, it is the you may meet a man. Okay. They contrast the appeal of a writer who merely confirms his reader's view with that of a writer who boldly challenges them. Well, that sounds like Carlyle, doesn't it? It's a writer who Carlyle is a writer who boldly challenges you as you read, as opposed, in contrast to the appeal of a writer who merely agrees with you. Okay, that wizened man. Okay, that clearly is what she's talking about. Let's see if there are any answers that are better for some reason. They develop an analogy. It's not an analogy, it's a contrast between kinds of individuals people are attracted to the kinds of writing they prefer. Nope. They challenge the idea that writers modify their ideas to appeal to a wide range of readers. We have no mention of appealing to a wide range of readers. They examine whether relationships based on shared ideas and interests are rewarding to both parties. Nope, that isn't happening. They provide examples from various writers in which the appearance of good and evil is deceptive. Clearly, A is the best answer. It is actually a contrast of 2 kinds of impacts that you can have as you read a passage. Okay? And that contrast is a better word, a better verb than develop, than challenge, than examine, than provide examples. Okay? So, and the rest of it is also correct. So A is the best answer. Okay. 11 is the question I think is the most important one for us to look at carefully because this is a course in rhetoric. And all of these things are happening in lines 75 to 83. And so this is a particularly challenging question to answer. And so I want to make sure that you understand why the answer is what it is. If I can find the right passage. Okay. It's actually on 2 different pieces of paper here. So it begins on line 75. When he is saying the very opposite of what we think, he says it so finely, with so hearty conviction. All right, look at that word so finely. Okay? With so hearty conviction. He makes the object about which we differ stand out in such great relief under the clear light of his strong and honest intellect. He appeals so constantly to our sense of the manly and the truthful. All right, do you hear all of those urgent adverbs going on? So I'm starting in the middle because I think that you may have missed that there were dramatically urgent adverbs sprinkled throughout this passage. You all saw that there is parallel structure, the here, here, and the oh. Okay? You understand that any clause that begins, when this is true, it's very much like Martin Luther King, remember? When you have felt this, when you have suffered this, when you have done this, then you will understand why it is hard for us to wait. Well, this is what this author is doing in this last sentence. When he is saying the very opposite of what we think, he says it so finely. And then we get after those dashes that we are obliged to say, here, here, oh, oh, okay? So we do have, in fact, the delaying of the conclusion because of these independent clauses to build up the reader's sense of anticipation. Employing dramatically urgent adverbs, it happens, and all of you probably noticed the inserting of dashes. What are they doing there? Contrasting he and we. Look at the use of pronouns in this last passage. There is a he, we contrast. So, in fact, if we're just looking at the rhetoric, the pronouns exist in this passage. The dashes exist in this passage. The dramatically urgent adverbs exist. The delay of the independent clause exists. The use of parallel structure exists. So, we can't rule any of the answers out based simply on looking at whether the grammatical or rhetorical evidence exists for them being there. They're all there. So now what do we have to do? We have to really work hard and understand if that rhetorical feature is doing what the author says it's doing, what the question says it's doing. Contrast he and we to set Carlyle apart and show how he is critical of everyone else. Oh my goodness, Carlyle isn't critical of everyone else. That's a wrong answer. Okay, I was excited about those pronouns, but that isn't what those pronouns are doing. Are those dashes inserted to highlight Carlyle's most influential ideas and opinions? He makes the objects about which we differ stand out in such grand relief under the clear light of his strong, honest intellect. He appeals so constantly to our sense of the manly and the truthful. Do the dashes highlight Carlyle's most influential ideas and opinions? Okay. That is a good answer. Those dashes do surround some of Carlyle's influences. So let's hold on to that and see if there's a better answer. Because remember, we have to find the best answer, not just the first right one. Do the urgent adverbs create a surprising conclusion for the reader? Not a surprising conclusion. Okay. Does the delaying conclusion of the independent clause, does delaying that conclusion of the independent clause build up the reader's sense of anticipation? Absolutely. We see this technique being used by this author a lot, where not this is true, but that is true. Not this is true, but that is true, and it stacks one on top of another. But even here, in this use of the independent clause at the end, where all of a sudden we're rallying, ho ho, and oh oh, and here here, it is a delay intentionally of the independent clause. We are obliged to say, okay? So it's building up the reader's sense of anticipation, and that we join in with this in agreement with how wonderful it is to read this author. Okay, finally, do we use parallel structure, the here, here, and the oh, to imitate a chorus of approval for Carlyle? Okay. We are obliged to say here, here to the writer before we can give the decorous oh to his opinions. All right. Well, we're obliged to say, hey, hold on here, before we can say decorous means beautiful and befitting. And that, this course of agreement But both of those terms aren't meaning exactly approval. Okay, we're saying, hey, hey, like, whoa, whoa, in the here, here. It can be agreement, but not necessarily. Now, if we're looking at these for the best answer, we are looking at E and D, and perhaps B are as good answers. But the delaying of the conclusion of the independent clause to build up the reader's sense of anticipation is this final praise. It's the icing on the cake here in this sentence, and it is the best of those answers. So the correct answer of 11 is D. That was a very challenging question, I think, because, in fact, all of the rhetoric happened in that passage that are mentioned there, so you couldn't rule out anything easily. Okay, folks, we're going to wrap it up here. I hope that was helpful. I know it is a long walk through a very difficult passage, and I appreciate your attention and tuning in, and I hope that will help you in your reading of challenging, especially early British work. All right, we'll be back in touch soon. Have a good afternoon. Bye-bye.